Ambassador Chen walked through the marble halls of the Galactic Council building for the last time. His footsteps echoed in the empty corridors as alien security guards watched him with their multiple eyes. The meeting had ended badly, just like all the others before it. The council chambers still buzzed with angry voices. Representatives from 800 different worlds argued about trade routes and mining rights. None of them cared about what Chen had just told them. Earth was leaving the Galactic Council. Humanity was done. Chen stopped at the main entrance and looked back. The building stretched up into the sky like a crystal mountain. Flags from hundreds of worlds hung from the ceiling. Earth's blue and green flag hung near the back, almost hidden behind the larger banners of more important species. "Sir," his aide Marcus whispered beside him, "the transport is ready." Chen nodded and stepped into the bright sunlight of Nexus Prime. The planet's 3 suns made everything glow with a golden light. Alien beings walked past them without looking. To them, humans were just another small species leaving the big political stage. The meeting had been about the outer spiral colonies. Humans had found 60% of the habitable worlds in that region. They had mapped the dangerous areas and built the first settlements. But when Earth asked for equal colonization rights, the Council said no. General Kretak of the Vorthak Empire had been the loudest voice against them. His reptilian face had twisted with disgust as he spoke. "Humans are too reckless," he had hissed. "They take too many risks. They don't think before they act." The Zikth Trade Syndicate had agreed. Ambassador Hickson, speaking through her translation device, had clicked and buzzed her disapproval. "Humans lack genetic sophistication," she had said. "They cannot manage proper colonies like superior species." Chen had tried to explain that human exploration methods worked well. Human colonies were successful and happy. But the council members had already made up their minds. Earth would get mining rights to 2 small moons and nothing more. That was when Chen had stood up and delivered his final message. No anger in his voice. No threats. Just simple words that would change everything. "Earth withdraws from all council territories and agreements," he had said. "This decision is immediate and final." The council chamber had gone silent. Then the laughter started. General Kretak had slapped his scaled hand on his desk. "Good riddance," he had roared. Maybe now the adults can get some work done. But not everyone had laughed. Ambassador Veltar of the peaceful Lumari had looked worried. Her silver fur had rippled with concern as she watched Chen pack his papers. The ancient keeper representative had also remained silent, his wise old eyes following Chen's movements. Now Chen sat in his transport ship as it lifted off from Nexus Prime. The planet grew smaller below them until it was just another star in the black of space. Marcus was busy at the communications panel, sending coded messages to human colonies across the galaxy. "All stations acknowledged, sir," Marcus reported. "Operation Quiet Exit is beginning." Chen watched the stars streak past as they jumped to faster-than-light travel. In 72 hours, every human colony, space station, and ship in Council territory would go dark. No emergency signals, no goodbye messages, just silence. The plan had been ready for months. Every human settlement had secret protocols built into their systems. When the signal came, they would pack up everything important and disappear. The Council would wake up to find that humanity had simply vanished. Back on Nexus Prime, the Council meeting continued without Earth's representative. The Etherean priest-philosophers talked about natural selection and survival of the fittest. They believed that weak species naturally remove themselves from galactic politics. "This proves our point," droned High Etherean Zixhal through his floating meditation sphere. "Humans were never meant for true civilization. They return to their primitive isolation where they belong." General Kretak was already planning military exercises in the space humans were abandoning. "We can use their old mining sites," he told his staff. "No point in wasting good resources." But Ambassador Veltar was reading reports that troubled her. Human trade ships were disappearing from scheduled routes. Human-operated facilities were shutting down without explanation. The humans weren't just leaving the Council. They were erasing themselves from galactic society. The Keeper representative, ancient Dr. Morden, was also studying data. His species had been around longer than any other. They remembered things that others had forgotten. Something about the human departure felt familiar to him, but he couldn't remember why. 3 days later, the report started coming in. Every human presence in Council space had vanished. The colony on Kepler 7 was empty, but nothing was damaged. The mining station at Ross 248 was gone, leaving only clean space behind. Human trade ships had simply stopped appearing at their usual stops. The most puzzling thing was how complete the disappearance was. Humans hadn't just left. They had taken everything with them. Even the garbage dumps were empty. Even the graveyards were gone, with not a trace left behind that humans had ever been there. General Kretak sent scouts to investigate human territories. The ships found empty space where colonies should have been. Planets that had supported millions of humans now showed no signs of recent habitation. It was as if humanity had never existed. Impossible, Kretak growled as he read the reports. You can't move entire cities without leaving traces. Where did they go? His military experts had no answers. The energy required to move so many people and so much equipment should have been detected by Council sensors. But there were no energy signatures. No ship trails. No communications intercepts, nothing. The economic effects started small. A few trade routes experienced minor delays. Some specialty food shipments were late. A handful of mining operations reported equipment problems. The Council's economists assured everyone that these were temporary adjustments. Ambassador Veltar was not convinced. She had been studying human economic data for weeks. Humans were involved in far more galactic commerce than anyone realized. They worked jobs that other species considered beneath them. They maintained equipment in dangerous places. They solved problems that others couldn't fix. Her analysis showed something shocking. Humans weren't just minor players in the galactic economy. They were holding up major parts of it. And now they were gone. Dr. Morden was having similar thoughts. His research into Council archives showed that humans had contributed more scientific data than any other species in the past 50 years. Their exploration reports, stellar navigation charts, and technological innovations were woven into every major galactic system. The old keeper felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen this pattern before, long ago in his species' history. Another race had quietly disappeared from galactic civilization. The economic and social collapse that followed had taken centuries to repair. As the first week passed, more problems appeared. Navigation errors increased in sectors where humans had maintained route markers. Equipment failures spiked in installations where human technicians had worked. Food shortages began on worlds that depended on human agricultural techniques. The Council's leaders remained confident. Temporary problems, they said. Other species would fill the gaps. The galaxy was better off without human interference. But deep in space, automated sensors detected something new. Unknown ships appeared at the edge of Council territory. They were larger than any vessels in the galactic database. Their energy signatures were unlike anything seen before. When Council ships approached to investigate, the unknown vessels simply vanished, leaving no trace of how they had departed. Humanity had departed quietly. But they had not disappeared. They were still out there, somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, and they were building something that the Galactic Council could not yet understand. 6 months had passed since humanity vanished from Council space. The problems were getting worse every day. What started as minor delays and equipment troubles had grown into something much bigger. Captain BestHFY of the Zikth merchant fleet stared at his navigation screens in confusion. The Kepler Nebula route should have been safe. His people had used it for decades without problems. The humans had always said it was stable, and human ships traveled through it regularly. But now his sensors showed dangerous energy readings. Gravitational fields were shifting in ways that made no sense. His ship's computer kept warning him about stellar radiation that shouldn't exist in this region. Turn back. His navigator clicked nervously. The route is becoming unstable. Impossible, BestHFY buzzed back. This is the safest trade route in the galaxy. The Council maps show clear passage. He pushed forward anyway. The Zikth Trade Syndicate couldn't afford more delays. They had already lost 3 cargo shipments to navigation errors in the past month. Other trade companies were starting to question Zikth reliability. The first sign of real trouble came when his ship's hull started heating up. The metal groaned under stress that the computer couldn't explain. Emergency alarms began screaming as unknown forces pulled at his vessel. Emergency jump, BestHFY ordered. Get us out of here, but it was too late. The gravitational anomaly caught his ship and twisted it like a toy. Captain Zexhi's last transmission was a confused distress call before his entire merchant fleet disappeared into the swirling energy of the nebula. News of the disaster reached the Council within hours. It was the largest commercial loss in 50 years. But worse news followed quickly. 2 more Zixth fleets had vanished in routes that were supposed to be perfectly safe. General Kretak was having his own problems. 3 of his military dreadnoughts had been destroyed in what his scientists called impossible stellar phenomena. The ships had been patrolling the Vega sector when their sensors detected a strange energy wave. The star went nova, his tactical officer had reported. But sir, that star wasn't supposed to go nova for another million years. The energy wave had vaporized all 3 ships instantly. But when Kretak sent investigation teams to the area, they found the star burning normally. No signs of a nova, no debris from his ships. It was as if the disaster had never happened. "Find me answers," Kretak roared at his science staff. "Stars don't just explode and then fix themselves." His scientists had no explanations. The data made no sense according to known physics. But Kretak was beginning to notice a pattern. All the disasters were happening in areas where humans used to operate. Areas where human scientists had filed warnings that the Council had ignored. Ambassador Veltar was connecting the same dots. Her research team had been analyzing the commercial disruptions across Council space. The results were frightening. "Look at this pattern," she told her aide, pointing at a holographic star map. "Every major shipping disaster in the past 6 months happened on routes that humans maintained." Her aide's silver fur rippled with concern. But those routes were supposed to be safe. The Council maps show no hazards. The Council maps were based on human data, Veltar explained. Human ships had been updating navigation information for decades. They reported stellar drift, gravitational changes, radiation zones. When they left, they took all that knowledge with them. The implications were staggering. The galactic economy depended on safe travel between star systems. If the navigation data was unreliable, trade would collapse. Ships would be lost. Colonies would be cut off from supplies. Veltar's team discovered something even more disturbing. When they tried to access the original human navigation reports, they found empty files. The data had been deleted remotely. Someone had gone through every Council database and erased all human contributions. Dr. Morden was making similar discoveries in his research archives. The ancient keeper had been studying scientific databases for weeks. What he found shocked him. Humans had contributed more research data than any other species in Council history. Their reports covered everything from agricultural techniques to stellar mechanics. They had shared freely with other species, asking for nothing in return. But now it was all gone. Research papers that had been available for decades were suddenly corrupted. Technical manuals that engineers depended on were blank. Navigation charts that had guided ships safely were full of errors. They didn't just leave, Dr. Morden told his research team. They erased themselves from our civilization. Every database, every file, every piece of information they ever shared. It's all been wiped clean. His team was struggling to understand how such a complete data erasure was possible. The information had been stored on thousands of different systems across hundreds of worlds. The security protocol should have made mass deletion impossible, but somehow humanity had reached into every computer system in Council space and removed their contributions. They had left behind a civilization that suddenly didn't know how to do the things it had been doing for decades. The agricultural crisis hit next. Dozens of worlds that had been producing abundant food crops suddenly couldn't grow anything. The soil had become sterile overnight. Plant diseases that had been controlled for years came back with devastating force. Dr. Hulvek, the Council's chief agricultural scientist, was baffled. "These farming techniques have worked for generations," he told the Emergency Agricultural Committee. The soil preparation methods are standard across all member worlds. But when his team tried to access the technical databases for solutions, they found mostly empty files. The agricultural knowledge that the Council had relied on was gone. The techniques that had fed billions of beings across the galaxy were no longer available. Who developed these farming methods originally? Dr. Hulvek asked his staff. The answer came back from the archives. Humans. Nearly every major agricultural advance in the past century had come from human scientists. They had shared their knowledge freely, helping other species feed their growing populations. Now that knowledge was gone, and the galaxy was starting to starve, the mining operations were failing too. Equipment that had worked perfectly for decades was breaking down in hostile environments. Automated systems that had maintained themselves were going offline without explanation. The worst problems were in the deep space mining facilities. These stations operated in conditions that would kill most species. Extreme radiation, crushing gravity, toxic atmospheres. Only humans had been willing to work in such places. Mining Director Kelnash had never paid much attention to the human workers. They were just another labor source, cheaper than robots and more reliable than other species. But now his operations were shutting down one by one. The environmental controls keep failing, his chief engineer reported. The equipment can't handle the radiation levels anymore. How is that possible? Kelnash demanded. These systems have worked for 20 years. The human technicians were constantly making small adjustments, the engineer explained. They modified the equipment to handle conditions that our specifications said were impossible. Without their maintenance, the systems are failing. Kelnash reviewed the personnel files for his mining operations. Nearly 30% of his technical staff had been human. They had worked in the most dangerous areas, solved the most difficult problems, and kept the operations running smoothly. And they had done it all for wages that other species wouldn't accept. The first reports of unknown activities came from the void reaches. This was the most dangerous region of Council space, where radiation levels and gravitational anomalies made normal operations impossible. No species had ever successfully established permanent facilities there. But long-range sensors were detecting massive industrial activity in the void reaches. Mining platforms appeared overnight, extracting resources at rates that violated known physics. Energy signatures suggested technology far beyond anything in the Council databases. When investigation teams tried to approach, their ships suffered massive system failures. Not attacks, but malfunctions that forced them to retreat. It was as if the very presence of the unknown technology was incompatible with Council systems. General Kretak studied the reports with growing anger. "Someone is operating in our territory without permission," he growled. This is an act of war. But his military advisors weren't so sure. The technology signatures didn't match any known species. The energy levels were impossible according to Council science. Whatever was operating in the void reaches was using technology that shouldn't exist. Ambassador Veltar had a different theory. She had been studying the timing of all these events. The departure of humanity, the collapse of galactic systems, and now the appearance of unknown technology in forbidden space. What if they're connected? She asked her research team. What if the humans didn't really leave? What if they just moved somewhere we couldn't follow? Her team thought the idea was impossible. Humans were too primitive for such advanced technology. They lacked the scientific sophistication of species like the Etherians or the Keepers. But Veltar wasn't convinced. She had worked with human diplomats for years. They were different from other species. Quieter, more patient. They seemed to think about problems in ways that other beings couldn't understand. And now the galaxy was learning just how much it had depended on that quiet 1 year after humanity's departure. The Galactic Council was facing complete economic collapse. The Kepler trade route, once the safest passage in the galaxy, had become a graveyard of ships. Over 200 vessels had been lost to hazards that appeared from nowhere. Trade Minister Hickson of the Zixth clicked her mandibles in frustrated anger as she read the latest reports. Her species had controlled galactic commerce for 3 centuries. Now they were facing bankruptcy. The humans must have sabotaged our navigation systems. She buzzed to her advisors. There's no other explanation for these failures. But her chief engineer disagreed. The navigation data was accurate when we used it, he explained. The problem started after the humans left. It's as if space itself changed when they stopped maintaining the routes. Hickson found that idea ridiculous. Space didn't change. Stars didn't move that quickly. Gravitational fields were stable for millions of years. The idea that human maintenance crews had been keeping entire star systems stable was impossible, but the evidence was getting harder to ignore. Every shipping disaster happened in areas where humans had worked. Every equipment failure occurred in systems that humans had maintained. The pattern was too clear to dismiss. General Kretak was having similar problems with his military operations. 3 more battle fleets had been lost to impossible phenomena. His war planners were starting to refuse missions in areas where humans used to operate. "Find me these humans," he roared at his intelligence officers. "I want them brought back to explain what they did to our systems." His scouts had been searching for months without success. Human space appeared completely empty. Planets that had supported millions of people showed no signs of recent life. It was as if humanity had never existed, but the scouts brought back disturbing reports. Their ships suffered strange malfunctions whenever they got close to former human territories. Computer systems would shut down without explanation. Sensors would go blind. Some crews reported seeing massive structures in the distance before their equipment failed. "What kind of structures?" Kretak demanded. "Unknown design, sir," his chief scout reported, "larger than anything in our databases. But every time we try to get closer, our ships lose power." The implications made Kretak's blood run cold. If humans had technology that could disable Vorthak military vessels without attacking them, what else might they be capable of? Dr. Morden was making discoveries that shocked even his ancient mind. The Keeper had been studying human archaeological sites across Council space. What he found challenged everything the Council believed about humanity's development. "Look at this," he told his research team, displaying holographic images of an excavation site. "This facility predates the Galactic Council by 5,000 years. The buried complex was clearly human in design. The architecture matched patterns found in recent human colonies, but the technology embedded in the walls was far more advanced than anything humans had openly displayed. They've been here longer than we thought," Dr. Morden continued. "Much longer. And they were more advanced than they let us believe." His team found similar sites on dozens of worlds, ancient human facilities hidden beneath the surface, all containing technology that surpassed current Council capabilities. The evidence suggested that humans had been secretly present in the galaxy for millennia. Why would they hide their true capabilities? One of his researchers asked. Dr. Morden studied the data with growing understanding. "Because they were studying us," he said quietly. "All this time we thought we were the advanced civilizations teaching primitive humans. But they were the ones doing the research. The economic crisis was spreading faster every day. Food distribution networks that had fed trillions of beings were breaking down. The Zikth trade syndicate had lost 60% of its shipping capacity. Entire sectors were becoming isolated as safe travel routes disappeared. Ambassador Veltar was working desperately to coordinate emergency relief efforts. But every solution her team proposed ran into the same problem. They didn't know how to do the things that humans had been doing for decades. "We need to restore the agricultural systems," she told the emergency council session. 47 worlds are facing starvation. "What do you propose?" asked High Etherian Zixhal from his floating meditation sphere. "We need to recreate the human farming techniques," Veltar replied. "But all their technical data has been erased from our databases." The Etherian philosophers had been dismissive of human science from the beginning. They believed their own mental powers were superior to any physical technology. But their telepathic abilities couldn't grow food or repair broken equipment. "Surely other species can develop similar methods," Zixhal said with typical Etherian arrogance. Veltar's silver fur darkened with frustration. "We've been trying for months. Our best scientists can't figure out how humans made crops grow in sterile soil. Their techniques seem to violate basic agricultural principles." The truth was becoming impossible to ignore. Humans hadn't just been good workers. They had been solving problems that other species couldn't even understand. Their primitive methods had actually been highly advanced solutions that other civilizations couldn't replicate. The first direct evidence of human activity came from the most unexpected source. Automated sensors near the galactic core detected energy signatures that matched no known technology. When investigation teams arrived, they found something that defied explanation. Entire asteroid fields were being moved through space, not mined or destroyed, but carefully relocated to new positions. The energy required for such operations was beyond anything the Council could produce. But the work was being done with precision that suggested intelligence and planning. "It has to be the humans," Veltar told the Council's emergency session. "They're the only species that's disappeared from our space." General Kretak was already planning military action. If they have this technology, they're a threat to galactic security. We need to strike before they become stronger. But Dr. Morden's archaeological evidence suggested that humans were already far stronger than anyone realized. These sites show advanced technology going back millions of years, he reported. If humans have been hiding their true capabilities for that long, we have no idea what they're really capable of. The Council's attempts at communication had failed completely. They had no way to contact humanity because all galactic communication networks had been built using human-designed protocols. Without human cooperation, the various species couldn't even talk to each other effectively. The isolation was making the crisis worse. Species that had worked together for centuries were becoming suspicious of each other. Trade disputes turned into territorial conflicts. The unity that had held the Council together was breaking down. Some worlds began withdrawing from Council membership. The Aquatic Alliance announced they were establishing independent trade relationships. The Crystal Communes stopped sharing their energy technology. The peaceful cooperation that had defined galactic civilization was fragmenting into chaos. But the most shocking revelation came from Dr. Morden's translation of ancient human documents. His team had found a buried library on Earth's former colony of New Geneva. The texts inside revealed the true scope of human planning. They call it the long patience, Dr. Morden explained to the stunned council session. A strategy spanning thousands of years. Humans deliberately presented themselves as primitive while they studied our civilizations, the GUR. Documents described a careful plan to integrate into galactic society while maintaining hidden technological advantages. Humans had allowed themselves to be treated as inferior, while they quietly became essential to galactic operations. They've been planning this departure for centuries, Dr. Morden continued. Every human contribution to our society was designed to make us dependent on them. When they left, they took the foundation of our civilization with them. The implications were terrifying. If humans had been manipulating galactic development for millennia, if they had deliberately made other species dependent on them, then their departure wasn't just economic disruption. It was the collapse of a carefully constructed system. General Kretak's rage had turned to something closer to fear. How long have they been watching us? How much do they know about our defenses, our weaknesses? The answer came in the form of a message that appeared simultaneously on every communication system in Council space. Not transmitted through normal channels, but somehow inserted directly into every computer, every screen, every communication device across hundreds of worlds. The message was simple. A star map showing the exact location of every Council military base, every strategic resource, every government facility. The precision was perfect. The intelligence was complete. The message had no words, but the meaning was clear. Humanity knew exactly where everyone was. They had been watching, studying, preparing, and now they were ready for whatever came next. Ambassador Veltar stared at the star map displayed on her personal communicator. Every secret installation, every hidden military base, every classified research facility was marked with perfect accuracy. They know everything, she whispered to her aide. They've been cataloging our entire civilization while we thought they were. 18 months after humanity's departure, reality itself seemed to be changing around the Galactic Council. The impossible had become routine. The laws of physics were apparently more like suggestions when humans were involved. Admiral Kolrex of the Vorthak, Third Fleet watched in horror as his flagship's main weapon spontaneously transformed into something that looked like flowering gardens. Where deadly plasma cannons had been mounted, crystalline trees now grew from the ship's hull, their branches reaching toward the stars. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with barely controlled panic, "the weapon systems aren't responding. They're not even there anymore. The computer says those sections of the ship are now classified as botanical gardens." The transformation had happened instantly when Kolrex's fleet arrived at what intelligence said was a human stronghold. They had found empty space, but then the changes began. Not attacks, not violence, just gentle modifications that turned instruments of war into works of art. How is this possible? Kolrex demanded, his scaled hands gripping his command chair. His science officer had no answer. "Sir, our sensors detect no hostile action. No energy weapons, no technological interference. The changes appear to be happening at the molecular level, but we can't detect what's causing them. Then came the most disturbing part. The entire crew found themselves gently transported to the nearest habitable world, not kidnapped or captured, but carefully moved while they slept. They woke up on a beautiful planet with a note apologizing for the inconvenience and explaining that their ships had been temporarily repurposed for aesthetic purposes. The message was clear and terrifying. Humans could have destroyed the fleet easily. Instead, they had chosen to demonstrate their power through art and mercy. The implications sent shockwaves through every military command in the galaxy. General Kretak received Admiral Kolrex's report with growing dread. The Vorthak Empire had the most powerful military in the galaxy. Their technology was built for conquest and destruction, but none of it seemed to matter against whatever humans had become. "They're playing with us," Kretak growled to his war council. "This is humiliation, not warfare." His military analysts agreed, but they were baffled by the technology involved. The energy required to restructure matter at that level should be detectable, his chief scientist explained. But our sensors show nothing. It's as if they're operating outside the laws of physics. Similar reports were coming from across Council space. Gravity fluctuations appeared near major installations, creating beautiful aurora displays, but also demonstrating precise control over fundamental forces. Temporal anomalies aged equipment decades in minutes, then restored it to perfect condition. The demonstrations were artistic, peaceful, and absolutely terrifying. Dr. Morden's research team had been working around the clock to understand what humanity had become. The archaeological evidence painted a picture that challenged everything the Council thought they knew about galactic history. "We've found over 300 sites now," Dr. Morden reported to his increasingly worried colleagues. "Human technology buried on worlds across the galaxy. Some of it is millions of years old. The buried facilities contained technologies that made Council science look primitive. Devices that manipulated space-time, systems that converted matter to energy and back again, computers that seemed to process information faster than light could travel. But humans only achieved spaceflight a few centuries ago," protested Dr. Velnash, Morden's chief assistant. "Their own historical records show they were primitive until recently." Morden's ancient eyes held a wisdom that came from centuries of study. What if their historical records were deliberately incomplete? What if they've been hiding their true development for far longer than we imagined? The evidence was mounting that humans had been spacefaring for millennia, possibly longer than any other Council species. They had explored the galaxy, established hidden bases, and studied other civilizations while carefully hiding their true capabilities. "They've been watching us evolve," Morden realized with growing awe. "All this time we thought we were the advanced species discovering primitive humans. But they were the researchers and we were the subjects." Ambassador Veltar was struggling to hold the Council together as member species began to panic. The economic collapse was accelerating, but now it was combined with the terrifying knowledge that humanity possessed technology beyond imagination. "We need to establish communication," she argued at the emergency session. "Whatever they want, whatever we did wrong, we can negotiate." But High Etherian Zixhal was adamant in his refusal to show weakness. The Etherian Collective does not negotiate with primitives, regardless of their current technological advantages. General Kretak agreed with military solutions. "We should mobilize every fleet in the galaxy. If they want a war, we'll give them one they won't forget." Veltar tried to explain the futility of such thinking. "General, they just turned your most advanced weapons into garden decorations." "They moved your entire crew across space while they slept. What makes you think more weapons will help?" The truth was that the Council had no way to fight an enemy that could manipulate reality itself. Human technology had advanced so far beyond Council capabilities that conflict would be like insects declaring war on gods. Dr. Morden's team made another breakthrough that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. They had found human documents describing something called dimensional engineering. The papers suggested that humans had learned to access parallel universes, drawing resources and energy from realities where the laws of physics work differently. "This explains the impossible energy signatures," Dr. Morden told the stunned Council session. "They're not violating our physics. They're using physics from other dimensions where different rules apply. The implications were staggering. If humans could access infinite parallel realities, they had essentially unlimited resources and capabilities. They could step outside normal space-time whenever they chose. "How long have they had this technology?" demanded Trade Minister Hickson. Dr. Morden reviewed the archaeological dating. "Based on our findings, at least 50,000 years, possibly much longer." The room fell silent as the council members absorbed this information. Humans hadn't just been hiding advanced technology. They had been operating on a level of development that made galactic civilization look like children, playing with simple toys. The council's desperate attempts at contact had yielded nothing. They had broadcast messages on every frequency, sent diplomatic ships to former human territories, even tried telepathic communication through Etherian mind links. But humanity remained silent. The silence was more frightening than any threat. It suggested that humans no longer considered the council worth talking to. They had become something so advanced that galactic civilization was beneath their notice. But then the automated systems began changing. Across council space, computers started displaying messages that no one had sent. Not communications from humans, but alterations to existing data. Historical records were being corrected. Scientific databases were being updated with information that solved problems the council had struggled with for centuries. Agricultural techniques appeared that could restore the failing food systems. The changes weren't forced or aggressive. They were offered as suggestions, with detailed explanations of how and why they would work. It was as if humanity was gently trying to teach the council how to survive without them. Some worlds began implementing the suggested improvements. Planets that had been facing starvation suddenly had abundant crops. Mining operations that had shut down were restored to full productivity. Trade routes became safe again as updated navigation data appeared in ship computers. But the help came with an unsettling realization. Every solution required technology or techniques that the council couldn't fully understand. They could follow the instructions and get results, but they couldn't comprehend the underlying principles. Humanity was treating galactic civilization like students who needed remedial education. The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. Ambassador Veltar was the first to understand what was happening. "They're not trying to destroy us," she told her increasingly desperate colleagues. "They're trying to save us from ourselves." The pattern was clear when she looked at it objectively. Every human intervention was designed to prevent collapse and suffering. The technological demonstrations were warnings, not attacks. The corrected data was assistance, not sabotage. "But why?" asked Dr. Morden. "If they're so advanced, why do they care what happens to us?" Veltar had been studying human culture and philosophy for months, trying to understand their motivations. What she found was a species that valued cooperation over domination, sustainability over growth, long-term thinking over immediate profit. Because that's who they are, she realized. They could have conquered the galaxy millions of years ago. Instead, they chose to guide other species toward their own development. We were never their subjects or their enemies. We were their project. The idea was both humbling and terrifying. Galactic civilization hadn't developed naturally. It had been carefully shepherded by a species so advanced that they could manipulate the growth of entire civilizations while remaining hidden. And now that project was failing. The Council had proven that they weren't ready. 2 years after humanity's quiet departure, the Galactic Council chambers had become a place of desperate meetings and growing panic. Representatives from 800 worlds gathered once again, but this time they came as refugees from their own failing civilization. Ambassador Veltar looked around the great hall where it all began. The crystal wall still reached toward the sky, but many of the member flags hung tattered and faded. Dozens of species had already withdrawn from the Council as their worlds fell into chaos. "We must find a solution," she addressed the assembly. "Food production has collapsed on over 200 worlds. Trade routes are failing daily. Our entire civilization is breaking down." High Etherian Zixhal still floated in his meditation sphere, but his usual arrogance had been replaced by desperate confusion. "Perhaps we should consider diplomatic contact with the humans," he admitted reluctantly. General Kretak's scaled face showed the strain of constant military failures. His forces had suffered humiliating defeats every time they tried to assert council authority. "How do we negotiate with an enemy we can't find or fight?" But before anyone could answer, something impossible happened. The air in the center of the chamber began to shimmer and bend. Reality twisted in ways that made the assembled delegates' eyes water. Then, without any flash of light or sound of machinery, a human figure simply appeared. She was a young woman with dark hair and calm eyes, wearing simple clothes that looked nothing like the elaborate uniforms and robes of the council members. She stood quietly in the center of the chamber, completely at ease despite being surrounded by hundreds of alien beings. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen," she said in perfect galactic standard. Her voice carried easily through the vast chamber without any amplification technology. "I represent the human collective." The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. The most powerful beings in the galaxy stared at a single human who had appeared from nowhere and seemed completely unafraid. General Kretak was the first to recover. "You will surrender yourself for questioning about your species' illegal activities," he growled, his hand moving toward his weapon. Dr. Chen looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. "General, I understand your frustration, but I'm not here to surrender. I'm here to explain what has happened and offer you a choice." She gestured toward the empty space around her, and suddenly the chamber filled with holographic displays, star maps, technical diagrams, historical timelines, information that the Council had been desperately seeking for 2 years. "My species has been watching your civilization develop for over 50,000 years, Dr. Chen explained calmly. "We've guided your technological advancement, prevented countless wars, and helped your economies remain stable. You never knew we were there because we didn't want you to know?" Ambassador Veltar found her voice first. Why hide for so long?" Dr. Chen smiled sadly. "Because you weren't ready for the truth. Your species measured success by dominance and exploitation. You created hierarchies based on power rather than cooperation. We hoped you would eventually learn to work together as equals." The holographic displays showed the true scope of human involvement in galactic civilization. Secret interventions and won 247 wars, preventing them before they could start. Economic adjustments that had prevented 89 major collapses. Technological gifts given anonymously to 23 species to help them avoid self-destruction. Every time your civilizations were about to fall apart, we quietly fixed the problems. Dr. Chen continued. "We were your maintenance crew, your problem solvers, your safety net, and you never noticed because you were too busy competing with each other." High Etherian Zixhal's meditation sphere dropped closer to the floor as his concentration failed. Impossible. The Etherian collective would have detected such widespread manipulation. "Would you?" Dr. Chen asked gently. "Your telepathic abilities are impressive, but they're limited to minds that think like yours. Human consciousness operates on quantum levels that your species can't perceive." General Kretak was struggling with rage and disbelief. "If you had this power all along, why didn't you conquer us? Why play these games?" Dr. Chen's expression grew even sadder. "Because conquest was never our goal, General. We wanted you to succeed on your own. We wanted to see you grow into a true galactic community based on cooperation and mutual respect." The holographic displays changed to show the current state of Council space. Dying worlds, failed economies, abandoned colonies. The result of 2 years without human intervention. "But you chose differently," Dr. Chen said. "You created a system based on exploitation and hierarchy. You dismissed us as primitives while depending on our labor. You rejected our partnership while taking our contributions for granted." Trade Minister Hickson clicked her mandibles nervously. "We can change. We can fix the problems. Just tell us what you want." "It's not about what we want," Dr. Chen replied. "It's about what you're willing to become. The old system is finished. It was never sustainable without our hidden support. Now you have to choose what comes next." The holographic displays showed 2 possible futures. In one, the Council continued its current path toward collapse, with species retreating to their homeworlds and abandoning galactic civilization. In the other, a new kind of society emerged, based on principles that humans had been trying to teach for millennia. "We're offering you a choice," Dr. Chen explained. "Continue as you are and face the consequences alone. Or join us in building something better." Ambassador Veltar stepped forward. "What would that mean? What are you asking us to do?" "Accept that cooperation is stronger than competition," Dr. Chen said. "Share your knowledge freely instead of hoarding it for advantage. Focus on improving what you have rather than constantly expanding into new territories. Resolve conflicts through understanding rather than force. The term seemed simple, but the implications were vast. Everything the Council had been built on would have to change. The power structures that had dominated the galaxy for centuries would become meaningless. General Kretak's military pride rebelled against the idea. You're asking us to surrender our sovereignty, to become subjects of human authority. Dr. Chen shook her head. We're asking you to become partners in something greater than any single species could achieve. Humans won't rule this new civilization. We'll participate in it as equals, along with every other species that chooses cooperation over domination. She gestured, and the holographic displays showed visions of what such a civilization could accomplish. Worlds restored to ecological balance, technologies that could solve energy and resource problems permanently. Exploration of the galaxy focused on discovery rather than conquest. This is what becomes possible when species work together instead of against each other, Dr. Chen explained. We've been preparing for this moment for 50,000 years. We have the knowledge and resources to make it happen. But we can't do it alone, and we won't do it by force. The council chamber erupted in arguments as representatives debated among themselves. Some species were willing to consider the human offer. Others rejected it completely. The unity that had held the council together was finally breaking apart. Dr. Chen waited patiently as the debates raged around her. She seemed completely unaffected by the chaos, as if she had expected this exact reaction. Finally, Ambassador Veltar called for order. What happens to those who refuse? She asked. Nothing, Dr. Chen replied simply. Species that want to continue the old ways will be left alone, but they'll have to manage without the support systems that humanity has been maintaining. Some will succeed, others will fall. That's their choice to make. The implications were clear. Species that joined the new system would have access to human technology and knowledge. Those who refused would face the full consequences of their unsustainable civilizations. Over the following hours, the votes came in. The peaceful Lumari were the first to accept the human offer. The scientific keepers agreed enthusiastically. Many of the smaller species that had been marginalized by the Council's power structure also chose to join. But the major powers were split. The Etherian Collective rejected the proposal with typical arrogance. General Kretak led the Vorthak Empire in refusing what he called submission to inferior species. The Zixth Trade Syndicate was divided, with some factions accepting and others withdrawing to their home territories. Dr. Chen accepted the results without emotion. The choice has been made, she said. Those who want to join us will receive coordinates for the new collaborative networks. Those who prefer isolation will be respected in that decision. She began to fade from view, her image becoming translucent as she prepared to leave. But Ambassador Veltar called out to her. Wait, what about those of us who want to learn, who want to understand what humans really are? Dr. Chen smiled, and for a moment she looked less like a diplomat and more like a teacher. Understanding begins with admitting how much you don't know, she said. Humans aren't superior to other species. We're just different. We learned cooperation because we had to. We developed patience because we needed it to survive. Our species has always been small and fragile compared to most galactic civilizations. We couldn't win through force or intimidation.